All right, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night. Whenever it is you tune in, hope all is going all right. My name is Noah. Here with me to my stage left or right is Brice. Introduce yourself again.
Yes, sir. I already know. Might know me as Brice _2K on most things, but Brice Lewis, um, host of Bleav in Hawks, also does Falcons content and covers both teams when I can. And so, obviously, today I'm here to talk about the next matchup the Falcons have. It's the Philadelphia Eagles. No, appreciate you letting me come on for sure, my guy.
Oh, absolutely. Pleasure is all ours. Speaking of ours, let's take a look at anybody that is tuning in right now, because I know that we talked about this upcoming stream, and I just wanted to see who is here with the early attendance. If you guys want to go ahead and show yourselves, let everybody know that we are here before we kick this thing underway. So, as we're waiting for that, I got a couple of questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Whew. Let's go, Jonte, Ozier. We got A-Town for life. Welcome in the building. All right, my question for you is, what happened on offense?
I mean, realistically, from what I've seen, it's a combination of multiple things. It seems like that we saw on Sunday. Obviously, the Kirk Cousins, is he healthy? Is it a mental block? Is it a physical block? Obviously, he didn't look like the Kirk Cousins that we're used to seeing. Obviously, this is Zach Robinson's first time calling plays, and we can make criticism about no play action, no quarterback movement. Some of the things he did, was it really as effective for the offense? And then also, just at the end of the day, the offensive line not having a great game, especially Caleb McGarry against TJ Watt getting absolutely destroyed out there, right tackle. We can look at the coaching adjustments and say they didn't make enough adjustments to affect that. But at the same time, I mean, he pretty much wrecked the game. And he's considered the best defensive player in the game. So, and Raheem actually said it yesterday, I believe. He was like, you can't stop him from making plays in the game because it's just that good, but you try to limit it. And I always said if they didn't get 2 penalties on 2 fumble recoveries, he would have had like 3 in the game. So that kind of tells you what he did and how impactful he was. And then obviously when you have one guy wrecking your shop, that motivates the other guys. And we knew Pittsburgh had one of the best defensive lines, pass rushing groups in the league. So that was my biggest concern going into that game, is that there's a reason why Pittsburgh, always has ferocious defense, and it's because of those guys up front. And the Falcons saw that. So there was a lot of things there, I think, that contributed to the loss. Rust, like I said, it was where is Kirk with his Achilles, offensive line play calling, just a much. That's why Raheem said it. He said we were good defensively as special teams. We just weren't good on offense. And that's what ultimately cost you the game.
Yeah, we're going to get into Caleb McGarry a little bit later because I have a film review that I'm working on. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it was as bad as people make it out to be with him, all things considered, because like you say, he's the best defensive player right now in the NFL. And he wanted to make sure that we knew that, right? Like anytime you have someone else going from another home stadium and is able to hype up the crowd and take a bow at the end of the game as if we just put on our own performance, like we expected this to happen, like that is something that only he can do. And we just witnessed that. So as far as that's concerned, I'm actually not super worried about Caleb McGarry. It was everyone else up in the middle. Like Jerome was saying, like he's worried about Dahlman. I was worried about Lindstrom because I think after he had that injury scare and they took him out of the game in the second quarter, he was discombobulated and he was looking really bad the rest of the way. And that was really concerning for him. Matthew Bergeron was every now and then line up against Cameron Hayward, and that's the battle that only Cameron Hayward could win. It's just a matter of like, all right, well, what do you do to stop him? And one of the other things I noticed is that when we were on offense, right, like everyone's going to point out that we were in pistol or shotgun like 96% of the time. The only time we were actually under center was that running back sweep to pick up the 4th and 1 to Bijan, and in the very next play, yeah, Ross Dwelly, man, you got to work on your timing. But we were very obvious and we were very predictable. And one of the things that made it so much easier for that Steelers defense to beat us was they were picking up on every little detail we showed them. We didn't even know that we were showing those things, right? Like I had in our Discord, someone posted up a TikTok of someone else. It's like examining Kirk Cousins' stance when he was in pistol. And it's like, he's got both feet like right next to each other in a normal stance. He's not how he was when he was in shotgun in Minnesota or in Washington, where he had his left foot forward when receiving the ball. And that could work if you're in pistol so as to not shift your feet a certain way to give a tell. But the fact that he was also kind of that way in regular shotgun, it made it seem like he wasn't yet comfortable with his planting foot, which is what got injured. So we were looking at those throws where it's like he had up the middle to Ray McLeod, and one of them got batted as he threw it, but the longest pass was 20 yards and it was accidental. That is just not something that you see out of your quarterback. Now we have older quarterbacks in the league. We just saw Aaron Rodgers come back from the same Achilles injury. Granted, he had about like 7 more weeks to heal up a little bit faster. And given whatever Aaron Rodgers is known for in the offseason, as far as the treatment that he does for his body, maybe those are kind of the difference makers. But he looked a little bit better as far as like mobility in the pocket and comfortability with himself. And I just want Kirk to get there so we can actually use him as a quarterback again and not as a statue that just hands the ball off as we run left. So, and that was the other thing I wanted to point out was like going back, like we had the very first 3 scripted plays for us on offense was just like runs to the left. I understand what we were trying to do there. We wanted to run away from TJ Watt, but at some point in time, you're not letting TJ Watt guess for anything else. Like you said, we had no play action. So TJ at some point was being unblocked. He had a free rush and he had to make a choice early on in the game. It's like, all right, well, do I go after the quarterback or do I go after the running back? At some point, he just straight up gave up on going after the quarterback because it's like he never had the ball after that. So why do it? And then he starts running back and then causing up a loss for a tackle. So you had that. You had Chris Lindstrom, whenever he was lined up next to Dahlman, he would kind of like tap him on the side. And then that's when Drew Dahlman would lift up his head and then get ready to snap the ball. And then that's why TJ Watt was able to time that snap because of how robotic it was. So that we had that offside penalty. I look back, it was a photo finish, but all right, it's after the game. He was absolutely not offside. He just timed it so perfectly and everyone else couldn't get in their stance to the point where it didn't matter. So we have to be less obvious in what we do as an offense. And that way, we're not helping the team beat us. So...
No, I mean, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think overall, I just think, again, since Zach's first time ops coordinator, I think these are things you have to learn. I think the thing is we sometimes forget there's a lot of learning going on. We are implementing 2 systems. This isn't a system that we have had for a while. And so he's learning maybe, okay, how can I be better in that situation? Is there something we can do to help maybe not make it as obvious? Is there something we can do to help with the overall situation? Obviously they're about to go on the road, so like you're going to be in a road environment. So if we're going to give signals, because I mean usually in loud environments you see someone tap or something, just in general, just because it's like you can't hear that well, just gives you an indication, hey, we're about to soon. But it's more of just like trying to make sure that when you're able to execute what you're trying to do without making it easy for the defense, because obviously sometimes defenses pick up on just certain things just because and I think overall, I think with the team, I think, you have film to look at the same things and say, okay, we probably need to change that and then make those adjustments. I mean, that's really the biggest part of this is adjustments. Got to be able to make adjustments and change things. That shows the type of coaching staff you have and the type of guys you have back there who's coaching, and then being able to, reflect and say, okay, let's do this differently. Because obviously Eagles have a really good defensive line coming up, so it's not like this is going to get easier. Now, you maybe would say, could they have maybe a better interior than Pittsburgh? Maybe they don't have a TJ, but they still have guys who can write games, and see how that does. Because even like on screens, it got to a point where they were even know, okay, a screen's coming, and I think that's the issue is like they were able to kind of pick up on stuff. And like I said, with Kirk being limited, it kind of, put him in a weird position because you mentioned the Aaron Rodgers thing. But the thing about the Aaron Rodgers thing, and they made a point of it too, is that Aaron Rodgers was also in shotgun a ton. He wasn't doing a lot of 5-7 step drops. So clearly, just in general with Achilles injuries, you can clearly see coaches do not want their quarterbacks doing all these drop backs and everything like that because, it's just more of a confidence and just getting more confidence in it, So for Kirk, and then also Rodgers luckily also has just overall better arm talent than Kirk. So he doesn't necessarily, Aaron Rodgers is known for throwing off balance. So he doesn't, quote unquote, need his pivot foot, even though it's better fundamentally, but it's not something he always relies on. Where Kirk's more of a fundamental quarterback because of how he is. So he needs to be able to have confidence in that pivot foot or that plant foot and be able to make throws and drive the ball, because that's obviously going to be important for us to make plays if we want to become the offense that they think they can become, especially in a crucial game coming up on Monday night.
Yeah, it brings up the question because I didn't look at the Jets during the preseason, so I don't know how much of Aaron Rodgers we saw there, but it does bring up the question. It's like, all right, well, I get that there's a timetable for a recovery for him, right? And we don't want to mess that up. But I think Mike Tomlin on the other sideline was trying to teach Raheem Morris a lesson, and he didn't accept it. Because, well, what do we see? We also saw another Steelers offense that had an offensive coordinator that we were very familiar with, but it was also their first time as quarterbacks learning that system. They had an older one, and they had a younger option, right? The older one has been he's also been in the league for 13 years now, drafted in the middle part of the 2012 draft, also was dealing with a leg injury, and it's like, hey, you know what? I get that we named you the starter, but you are not the healthier option in order to give us the chance to win. So we've gone with Justin Fields last second. Yes, he isn't as experienced in the system, but sometimes all you need is for something new to give you a chance. So they went with that option. We went with the other option, and we looked worse as a result. So I think when it comes down to just preparation and using the preseason as a way to either help your starter or help your backup a little bit more, because we only gave them like a couple of throws, and then they were like, all right, well, we'll pull you out of the first game. And then they were kind of being like, all right, well, it's to prevent injury. But we're week 1 going into week 2, and now we're having injury concerns when he didn't get hurt during the game. So it's just like, could we have seen this as fans a little bit more clearly? Could we have seen this offense a little bit more noticeable? Because the person that was taking over in our preseason games was Taylor Heineke, and he's not even here anymore. So it's like, you wanted to evaluate your other talent, your second stringers, your third stringers, your etc. And yet you had the worst quarterback out there on the field to do that for them. So now everyone else looks worse as a result. And now it's like, all right, well, our starters, they should be ready, right? Let's go out there and run our game plan. And oh, goodness, we, outside of one drive, couldn't even threaten multiple first downs. Like, we were 2 for 9 on third downs. Like, and I'm pretty sure those happened early on in the game. It's just a really weird thing to look at from an offense where we had 2 years of Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder, and yet we have Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix, and we're still worried about the quarterback.
You know what's interesting is that I think when it comes to the preseason talk, one thing I've always said is that it depends on when people say they should have played. It depends on what you mean. If you just mean in terms of him just playing and maybe starting the process of, if it is a mental thing, especially just him playing, getting some reps and just getting more confident in that plant leg and Achilles, that yeah, I completely get that, and that's a very justified, thing. Now, if you're talking about in terms of the offense in the stuff they're doing. I mean, it's the preseason. You're not half this, like pretty much probably 80% of the stuff we saw in the game Sunday, they weren't going to do in the preseason. So that still would have been the first time they ran that stuff. The only difference is they just would have played football before. So that's why I always ask people specifically, what do you mean by they should have played in the preseason? Like, what exactly do you mean? If you're talking about for Kirk to just throw on it, because like I said, Raheem's coming from a place that didn't do that, and they're fine. So, but also the thing we also look at too is that Sean McVay's been there, Stafford's been there. Really, like it's the offense has already been established. You could start not playing your starters if you already have an established offense that's already played. The only difference in this situation is that like you have a new offense. So there were maybe a little bit more points to maybe think about playing your starters. New offense, quarterback coming back, trying to get more confidence in his Achilles, things of that nature. And so that's why people are, like I said, very critical of Raheem's preseason stuff. But like he says, because I always say play devil's advocate, and I say, I mean, at the end of the day, though, if he plays the starters and like Kyle or Drake goes down with ACL, we're gonna be like, why did he play? Like, let's be honest, we're gonna say that because people are gonna be like upset. It's just it's really there's no way you can win except them playing and nobody getting hurt, and then everybody's fine. You know, so it's that's why preseason now, especially with the 3 preseason games and how you're seeing teams do it, it's weird now because it's like it feels like, okay, what's the positive? What's the negative? Is there really a perfect solution? There's always a risk, but then it's like if you don't take the risk, then are you being too conservative? So there's no perfect answer for people, really. It's just a matter of you got to feel like you do for each individual coach and each individual team and feel like, okay, what's best for our individual team? And you kind of have to live with whatever results come from that. And Raheem has just taken I'm not going to get anybody hurt, especially after the Miami week when 3 people went down. He's like, all right, yeah, this is definitely justifying me not playing anybody.
Yeah, I kind of wonder like how much of a scare that was for DeMarco Hellams and Braylon Trice and those guys. So it's like, all right, well, they were intended to be our starters. I don't want to make anything worse, but you know, it's interesting because we have 32 different teams, 32 different answers to this, and some of them, like Kansas City, for example, like they didn't have an offensive coordinator change, like they didn't have anything else that was new, but yet we still saw Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce out there, for example, and we're still trying things. And we were like, why are they out there? Like, you're back-to-back Super Bowl champions. Like, why do you need to be out here? And it's just like there's a difference between some of the older coaches in the NFL. They have their way of going about things, and they have some of the younger coaches that are trying something new. And overall, like, I think a lot of teams can chop this up to like, all right, well, we're just gonna get our bearings across. Most of the league's quarterbacks, I think it was about at least half of them couldn't even throw for 200 yards in their game.
Yeah, the offenses and quarterback play.
A lot of rust, a lot of slow playing offenses, and I think that it's going to develop over time for some of these teams, ourselves included. It just makes it so much amplified when we're going to be on prime time for this game on Monday night, Sunday night the previous next game, and then we're going to have a division rivalry matchups, like a gauntlet of them, and like all those offenses, they're already clicking. Like Philly scored up 34 points, and granted, they could have lost that game had it not been for the Packers, like, you know, kind of shooting themselves in the foot early with the inability to capitalize on the turnovers that they had to start those games. So like it was 6-0. It very well could have been 14-0, and then they just lost by 5. Like any of those kind of mistakes can matter. And Eagles, they were not perfect in themselves. So what does it take for our defense to kind of capitalize and keep us in this game? Because we didn't have any turnovers. We didn't give up a ton of yards, but when it came down to it, like we were 8 for 17 on third downs as a defense. So how do we try to get off the field against this offense that we see for Philly?
I mean, I think as the game went on, I think the defense played better. I mean, if you think about what they did, I mean, especially with 3 turnovers, not allowing a touchdown. I mean, they pretty much, you know, did what they needed to do in terms of, you know, what you would want your defense to do. Obviously, you could say could have forced a little bit more turnovers, things like that, obviously, right? But I think for the Eagles game, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, this is going to be a different type of game. They're not going against an offense that will be anemic and Arthur Smith calling plays. You know what I'm saying?
I had this conversation with him before the game, and he was like, all right, well how are you not giving Justin Fields a chance to be good against this team? I'm like, look, he might get you a field goal. And that's exactly what he did. All he gave you was field goals. Like, Steelers as an offense, they never threatened us in the end zone. Like, I don't think they had a route. Like, and that was despite how George Pickens was playing against AJ Terrell. And we'll kind of get into that matchup a little bit later. But, like, I was still kind of right. Like, we absolutely did everything we did as a defense to mitigate and limit. Like, I remember, like, halfway into the game, Justin Fields had, like, 40 passing yards. It wasn't until the deep pass before the end of the half and then the other plays in the third quarter to the first deep shot that counted towards Pickens. Like if George Pickens wrecked us then in the game and he left the field 85 receiving yards total, like he did a lot worse to other teams. So I'll be fine with that as an end result. It was just everyone else. Like the matchup that I wanted to pay attention to was Mike Hughes and what he could do against the second wide receiver, which was Van Jefferson. And Justin Fields like never threw it his way. Like, I think he got one catch for 1 yard. Yeah, so I had to look at Mike Hughes in a different sense, and they were kind of blitzing him, and they were sending him in run support a little bit more, and he had to pay attention to other things. So I think he did pretty well. But yeah, now we're facing AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley in the background, Dallas Goedert, who's a secret like impactful player for the Eagles offense. Like, I think they said like the completion percentage when he's not on there, when he's not on the field for Jalen Hurts, is like a almost 10% difference, just because of him being a check down in the middle of the field or whatever. So there is a lot of things to focus on, and that's something that Justin Fields never did. They never challenged us with anything else. Like, all right, we're gonna try something with Pickens, we're gonna try something with Freiermuth. No one else had 3 targets. So it's going to be a much more spread across the field, and we have to learn that, all right, everyone's going to be ready. And I do want to make sure that we see some improvement in the guys like Justin Simmons, who was playing off of a rushed being on the field. Matthew Judon's the same way. Like, they both had some impact on that game, and I want to see them get more comfortable in their roles as a defender. Who else do you want to be able to focus on to give us a better matchup in this game?
I think overall, I feel like, there was really no one outside of maybe AJ that you were like, okay, he didn't really have a great game, I guess. AJ pretty much is going to be the guy on AJ Brown. So he's going to be AJ versus AJ. So whoever wins the AJ battle, I think, will be very important in this game. I know he didn't have the best game against George Pickens, and so I know people are kind of getting on to him for that. But, if he can do what he needs to do there, I think that'll help. Again, because like I said, Mike Hughes is going to have a better matchup this week against Devontae Smith. He obviously has to step up in that. Secondary is going to be tested this week. So this will be a great game, I think, for the safeties to potentially have a really good game. Hurts got picked off a few times last week. So, they're
by their safeties.
I feel like there'll be some opportunities for this defense to create plays, and that can be very timely for this offense. Give them short fields, get them some rhythm. I think when you look at the offense and want to get them rhythm, it's just about, hey, get a confident drive, get them score a touchdown, things of that nature, and just get them on an upward trend. I think I've said that I would like to get guys like Ray McCloud more involved, because there's people hate on Ray McCloud. The only touchdown drive we had, Ray McCloud had 3 catches on that drive, and 2 of them are like big catches. So and there's also, I look at him like, okay, well, he's a speedster, right? So get him in space, let him make plays in space, and keep pressure on the defense. And then obviously we know we need to get the ball to Drake. Literally everybody, we need to get the ball to more in general, just because not a lot of people exactly. So we need to do more evenness within the offense, spreading the ball out, letting people get more opportunities to make plays. And then obviously, like I said, offensive line just has to hold up in this game. Like I said, their interior is probably their strength. So this is going to be a game for Lindstrom to bounce back, and Dahlman and Bergeron. If they can hold up, especially again, if Kurt is limited in his mobility, the last thing I think they will obviously want is him getting pushed off his spot, right? Obviously, in this situation, if you're Zach, you can create hot routes for him. If there's situations like that, obviously we did see him at times get it to Bijan out in the flat a couple times in that last game, so that could be a good opportunity for guys like Algier, especially if he gets more runs too. But also being able to run the football more and not just do a bunch of Bijan. Like I said, Algier needs to get more carries because he can provide a different element that could really be very effective. So I think and I think when he ran it effectively. So I think it's just I wonder if Zach got thrown out of his rhythm with what was happening, and then he was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do here to fix this? And so then that led to a lack of sometimes maybe, okay, hey, don't forget you have Algier, you can get the ball to, or you can do something different here instead of this, and et cetera. So I think, like I said, it'll be extremely interesting with everybody talking about it, how he responds and how he calls this next game. Because I think a lot of people are going to be looking at that. Because this definitely has you've been trashed all week, and then you come out and now you call a really great game. Or this continues, and now everybody's just like, oh crap, did we make a mistake, offensive coordinator? It's this season. Like, people are already saying the season's over just because they look at the two teams we have coming up are 0-3. That means it's probably over. And I'm like, all right, guys, let's calm down. It's not over. Now, obviously, they have less margin for error, but, they're with everything going. Matt Ryan mentioned it too. Rust, just getting more chemistry, playing more, allowing yourself to improve. That's part of the process as well. We cannot be like week one is a reflection of what this team will be the entire year.
Yeah, I was listening to the Bleav in Falcons podcast with Ovi Mahaley and Michael Turner, and one thing that Michael Turner was saying, it's like, hey, you didn't spend all this money for week one, so like you got to make sure that everyone is able to play that out and just like have patience for this team. So that is just calm yourselves, guys. Mm-hmm. This is not a modicum of things to come for every single game, but it is the starting point that we're going to look back to when this season's over, going into next year. Like, all right, well, did we learn a lesson then? So just like how we faced Philly with our first game with Arthur Smith, and it was that 32-6 game where it's like we also couldn't get in a rhythm. Like, we had some other good games as an offense, and the other game that I remember vividly was back in 2018. It was a kickoff game where we had against Philly right after the playoff matchup we had against them in the divisional, and that game was probably Matt Ryan's worst looking game as a starter. Obviously, he had some other games before then where, like, I remember a Cardinals game where he threw like 5 picks and we still won. But he looked very out of sorts with himself. And that was because he also had a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive system with Steve Sarkisian. And everyone was kind of like, oh, goodness gracious, Matt Ryan is awful. He's washed. There's nothing left in him. 2018 ended up being one of Matt Ryan's best years, like rivaling 2016 in terms of his numbers. So, like, people can get it turned around. Now, with the health injury and all these other things and the rust and stuff like that, like, there's that factor. I actually kind of want to touch on the factor that Philly is coming back from Brazil. I wonder if there is an adjustment that they need to have with that flight coming back, because we've had some trips over to London and coming back there, having to play another game. I don't know how much of an effect it has, but I think it brings up another conversation. So do you think there's like rust there?
I mean, the thing is, for them, they played on a Friday. They didn't play on Sunday in Brazil, so that probably could help getting that extra. Because I don't know how soon they left. Like, I would assume maybe you left right after the game, so you're getting back into the States. I don't know how long that flight is from Brazil to Philadelphia, but you assume they probably didn't get back till Saturday. They probably didn't practice Sunday. Maybe didn't practice Monday. If anything, that was a film study, and then you get back on the field Tuesday. So there's a chance that could also not be an issue. And luckily, again, they're at home, so it's not like they're having to travel again and then the next week. So I don't know how much of a big issue that could be. I mean, it could be. We'll see. Because again, they're playing on a Monday night, so again, they're getting like basically 10 days in between their last game to get ready for the next game. Where this was a Sunday to Sunday game, then you could be like, all right, yeah, that Brazil rust might really play a factor. So I don't know how much it will particularly impact this game for them, but like I said, we'll see when they get on the field if it actually does do anything to them. Because like I said, maybe it could be a player by player basis. It may not be a team basis, but maybe one player is still working their way back than another person.
Sure.
So it all just kind of depends on that for the most part.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to like reviewing this game, I don't think anyone's going to care about it. Like, they don't keep track of excuses in the stat sheet. And same goes for us as well. So let's just play our way and we can get through this. So, yeah.
I mean, because like I said, after this 3-game stretch of hell, as some people call it, you play 3 straight NFC South teams, right? You would assume Panthers are a win. And that's the last out of the 3-game stretch. And then you got to see what happens with the Saints and Bucks, which both look good. Obviously, Saints play the worst team in the league in the Panthers, but they look good. And then Tampa Bay, again, the Commanders, a lot of people think will be like a bottom 5, bottom 10 team. And this
is the beginning of their rebuild. Like, they're not expecting to look good right away.
Yeah. So, we really don't know how good Tampa Bay or New Orleans is yet. We don't know. So, I mean, there's a chance. I mean, I've always said the key to this season for me is they have to win. If they want to firmly grasp this division, they have to sweep the division. They have to win the games. Because if you lose these 3, then you win those 3. Now you're back to 3-3 before you go into your 7th game, which is against Seattle. And now you're in the, okay, let's see where we're doing now. So, just getting this game could be huge if they're able to get it on Monday. Because let's say you do lose Kansas City, right? You're 1-2, but then you got 3 straight divisional games. You win those games. Now you're 4-2, and now every concern we had is gone for the most part. So, and hopefully in those 3 games, offense improves every week. Kirk improves every week, and we don't suffer any major injuries. And now we are feeling better about themselves. So that's why people say it's week 1, like you can't overreact. Yes, we know what it looks like, but because I'm seeing some people saying, oh man, I'm afraid this might be a blowout. And I'm like, I don't think that it will be, but I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where, like I said, a lot of people are just spooked from the game. So they're just like, I have no confidence in this team. And all of it stems from the Kirk Cousins and thing, and we'll have to see, because obviously you got the why doesn't Penix play type thing. I said at the end of the day, 2 people forget. Falcons don't have a 3rd quarterback on this roster. They don't even have a 3rd quarterback on the practice squad. So even if you start
Nathan Peterman was on there.
Oh yeah, they did sign Nathan Peterman. My fault. He's on the practice squad, but really,
I don't want to see him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't want to see Nathan. He's like the worst quarterback who keeps getting a job. So you pretty much are if like I said, if it is truly a mental thing, literally all you can do for Kirk is just let him keep playing, and just let him get more confident. That's really all you can do in that situation. It's not something you could just he can't not play and then expect him to come back. Oh, now I have trust in my Achilles. You kind of have to just let him play, but you have to figure out how to be effective.
Yeah, I was listening to Ovi and Michael talk about that too. It's like sometimes you just need to get hit just to let your body gets comfortable with being hit, and like you need to put your certain parts of your body that went through those injuries and be like, all right, well, I'm okay, because you got to remember, like this is Kirk Cousins' like first major injury that he's had in his life almost, and sometimes he doesn't know how to get into that mentality of coming back and trusting it again. But we have a lot of people on this team, like Matthew Judon, having to trust his bicep or whatever, like when rushing the passer. Like that's pretty important for him. Troy Anderson's much of the same. He was a quarterback as well. So it's like these guys can probably help him. It's just like getting mentally ready. And no one is a better example right now than Michael Penix coming back from an injury, especially dealing with his legs. So I think that those conversations need to be had as well. I don't know how much they've been having that discussion, but like when you have quarterbacks like those guys who are very familiar with each other's situations, and it's still coming out looking like this, you gotta trust that they're smart enough to get this done, right? Like Michael Penix, he doesn't have experience in the NFL per se, but he has experience being in this position as the hurt quarterback coming back and trusting himself again. So they need to make sure that things like that are going and that are happening in there. And Raheem, like, we got to trust him a little bit more, because I don't know what was going on with I feel like Kirk is ready, or that he's healthy. And like, that's not up to you to decide that. And it's not, especially not up to a feeling that he's ready. Like, let us know right now, is he ready or not? Because, we can have that conversation a little bit later in the season. Like, all right, well, like, do we see Penix at all in the season, or are they trying to make sure that Cousins like finishes this out, like, no matter what, just to justify the contract that we gave him? Because I think he can be equally as helpful when he's on the sideline as was Russell Wilson was for Justin Fields, I'm sure. Like, sometimes you got to suck up your pride and be like, all right, well, I want the best person on the field for this job. And if the best person is the hurt person, then go with the next person that's more available for you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the end of the day with that, it's optics. If he goes out there and plays well, people are going to be like, you can't start Kurt again. And it's just like, and that's only just because he was a top 10 pick. That's the only reason why. Because they feel like, well, you might as well just go with him. And because there's no way you could have two guys playing well on the same team at the same position, especially quarterback. If you only can have one. If two play well, the other one needs to play. So that would be the big issue which I think people are wondering, how much does that influence their decision? Like, okay, if we have Penix play and he plays well, people are going to be like, we got to stick with Penix in that situation. Because I don't know if you would feel that way if Penix plays well. Because it's weird to say he has to play bad to justify putting Kurt back in there. It should be like, okay, we want a backup quarterback to come in and play well in general, just anyway. But even if he's our rookie, it's okay to say if Kurt's better, okay, we can put it back in there.
Yeah, no, part of me still wants to pay attention to Pittsburgh right now and see like how they deal with that discussion too, because like Justin Fields can go out there and start again and look a lot better than he did against us, and then they're having that conversation. So how does Mike Tomlin deal with that, and then how can Raheem Morris like learn from that lesson? Because obviously Russell Wilson was by far a more mobile quarterback than Kirk was, but it's not like Kirk couldn't move at all before this. So like, you just gotta take these situations and learn from everyone that's around you, right? Like Raheem Morris had this put people first mentality, and I kind of want to, and I want to stick with that. I want to hold that to him, making sure that he's putting his people first. Because when you're sending out the hurt guy just to try to trust himself in the situation in a game that actually matters now, it doesn't seem like you put him first. And I don't want this to be a sign of things to come, right? Like, I don't want this to be like, oh, well, now Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon and Darnell Mooney are like wondering if they signed with the wrong team, because we heard this coach speak in this lip service, and now we're getting into the game, and the person that we wanted to trust the most is not in a position to win us football games right now. So like, hey, like Darnell Mooney chose us over the Chiefs, right? Like Matthew Judon chose us over the Bears. Justin Simmons chose us over New Orleans. All those three teams are winning.
Yeah. And
like, I don't want that doubt to settle in the locker room when it's like, all right, well, I thought I saw Penix look pretty good in practice for us right now. Like, he trusts himself, he trusts his legs, and I think he's also really equipped for the pistol and shotgun and these kind of things. Like, I don't see how he can mess it up any worse than what Kirk looked like, but we'll see. Because one last thing I'll say about the Pittsburgh, they barely rushed more than 4 people. So they didn't have to send blitzes. Again, could it just be that's because we already knew what was going on before the snap, so we didn't have to do anything? Or was it just because, like, hey, we trust our 4 guys to get there because our 4 guys are Alex Highsmith, Cameron Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, and TJ Watt. And their alignments was something that I don't think Philly's going to be able to replicate either, because they had a wide 9 stance for both of them, which is why they were thriving in that outside zone, stopping those plays and getting around the edge. Like, they don't really, like, Philly doesn't really do that, but they will have a scenario where it's going to be a 3-on-2 up in the middle. And if you don't provide protection in front of Kirk Cousins, then he can't step up in the pocket. And now it's going to make him look a lot worse. Whereas Penix, he knows what an immobile or what a collapsing pocket would look like, and he can get out of that situation and provide you with some more time so that the play doesn't get ruined. So, like, I'm not saying this as a way to like, oh, well, this justifies putting Penix in right away, because yeah, there's a chance that he can look good. There's also an equal chance he can look bad right now, and now we're damaging the person that we're trying to save. So I don't know. It's very interesting. I do see that Philly was also kind of struggling in the secondary too. So like they're not having to worry about like dropping 8 people into coverage or 7 people into coverage, just like making a feast for the 2 people that we really need to pay attention to. But it just makes me a little bit more concerned that we might not get this done in time for our game, and then it's going to be too late for that one, and it's going to be too late for Kansas City. So at least in this aspect, I can say that we played disciplined, right? We only had 5 penalties that go for 34 yards. Those penalties were kind of the ones that like took back a lot of our positive plays. Like we had had a good play with Kyle Pitts in the crossing route. We had a good play with Bijan on another situation to try to get us out of our own end zone. And yet, like, those were also the plays that like couldn't let us continue some of these other drives too. So how do you think the time of possession battle is going to go in this game? Because Philly can also like hold on to this ball and then not give us a chance. And we're going to have to be in a position where every single time we touch the ball, it's going to have to account for points.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a very important part of this game. I mean, honestly, one way you want to tire out guys like Jalen Carter and then the big guys is to keep them on the field. And so that's why I think running the football is almost as passing the football for the Falcons this week. Because if they're able to run the football and hold on to it, I mean, that can help to get a pass rush, tire out the defensive linemen, which could then lead when you do some passes, better protection for Kirk, and then Kirk, if depending on how he is, can make plays, see the field a little bit better, and go from there. So I think those are the things that I think I'm gonna be looking at for them, because split time possession against the Eagles, because the Phillies usually a time of possession team. Because of the fact they could run the football with Jalen Hurts and them. They're not like this over the top big play offense all the time. Even though they can do it, that's not what they're known for. So I think that's going to be the big thing really for them. It's just to be like, all right, let's be able to possess the ball a little bit, help keep our defense fresh and tire out their guys. So that way it gives us more advantages when as the game moves on. Especially again, you get a good dose of Bijan, a good dose of Tyler Algier. Especially Tyler, how violent he runs through the hole. Really, really make him stop wanting to tackle as we get later into the game.
Yeah, the other thing that Philly also shares with Pittsburgh is that they also have a kicker that can kind of take them like, all right, well, I only need to get to like the 35-yard line on your side of the field in order to be in scoring range. So, yeah, Jake Elliott is also like a good kicker that can kick very far. And that's something that, well, pretty much every team had one, it seemed. Like, I don't think there was I think they mentioned that there was no other week that was like this in terms of, like, kicking from 50 plus. It was like almost 20 or something or across all the games. Like, the scoring range has gotten extended. And you're going to have to make sure that they're not, like, approaching this one. So, again, we didn't have a lot of negative plays for us on first down and second down, but when it got to third down, like, those are going to be those critical moments where either we need some more situational pass rush and we need to, like, trust in ourselves to hold up downfield, or we start creating turnovers and we start looking after that ball. Like, we have Jesse Bates, we have Justin Simmons, like, they have 50 interceptions amongst themselves. We have a pass rush now with Matthew Judon and Grady Jarrett up the middle. Like, I want to be able to trust in those guys to cause something to keep us in the game and give us a short field again. So those are going to be the key moments as well. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to be able to discuss?
Not necessarily, unless you just want to go ahead and kind of be like, what is your number one keys to the game against the Eagles on Monday night for the Falcons to be successful?
Yeah, I guess I'll give us this question. Like, on either side of the field, who do you think is the person that maybe we haven't talked about yet that we want to be able to step up for us? You can pick your own team. You can pick Philly. Doesn't matter.
Shoot. I mean, I guess I'll go with Drake London. More just obviously getting opportunities, but I mean, obviously he's the number one receiver, so he has to be able to make plays for us, and you know he'll have a good matchup. I mean, obviously Joey Porter Jr. is a tough matchup for Pittsburgh. And obviously he was barking after the game about Drake's stat line, but for Drake, this is a good time for him.
Okay, what was his though? Like one tackle? Like,
yeah, I mean, listen, you know, people got to do that for their credit, man. But
he comes from a family of talkers. I'm not.
Exactly.
I'm used to it with him.
Yeah. So I mean, really, if Drake steps up, have a big game. I mean, because I really think he could be a really valuable player for Kirk because he's a big body receiver. You don't need Drake's not, even though he can. The game isn't going deep. So he could be a really good security blanket for Kirk, for over the middle, maybe some slants, you know, maybe some comebacks, things like that, and just give him a nice big target that he can throw to that doesn't have to be this overly difficult, you know, throw, you know, because that's gonna be the biggest thing realistically is if Drake can get going, that'll open up some other things. Obviously, Pitts, I mean, he was the one who scored a touchdown last week, as much as we criticized for not scoring touchdowns. So, you know, and he had a couple plays called back. There were a few plays. When people go back to Kirk Cousins' film, that Kurt Pitts could have gotten the ball, so he could have had a much bigger game than he had. So, really, I think if Drake could get more involved in the offense, I think that would really help out.
Yeah. So, I think for me, I want to try to provide one for both sides. I think number one for me is for the Falcons, Troy Anderson. We saw a good amount of him on the fields, which was a nice welcome because he provides some extra speed and extra coverage in the middle of the field, and that's something that I want to be able to for him to take care of.
Rating for the Falcons defense.
Yeah, but Nate Lama was ahead of him, so like. I want him to be able to secure that spot because there's something that Troy Anderson can do that Nate Lamb and the other guys can't do, right? Like he's much more rangy, but he also needs to be able to be in a position where he can cover downfield, but also provide the secure tackle against Jalen Hurts when he wants to scramble. So I see that matchup being a key. So that way we're not letting up a bunch of rushing yards because, you know, we kind of saw the Wizards fields. Like he didn't have a whole lot of yards, but he had a lot of attempts. He had like 17 attempts, even though it went for like 40-something yards. So, like, we're now facing another quarterback that isn't afraid to go out the pocket, but it's also really difficult to tackle. And I just want to be able to make sure that we have someone, because I like our run support with our corners now. Like, we've always been able to trust Jesse Bates and run supports because he's so smart that he can, you know, shoot down in the gap and make a tackle. But let's get our starting middle linebacker more comfortable in this game. Let's get him another role so that he can look out for. And I think being either in coverage against Dallas Goedert or protecting Jalen Hurts from having to, you know, wreck the game for us defensively, especially when it comes to like these third and shorts. And I think it's very easy territory for Jalen to consider like moving forward. And then for the Eagles, I would probably have to say it might be weird, but I'm kind of going Kenneth Gainwell. I saw a good amount of him in places where Saquon wasn't on the fields, and they also provided him with a couple of different things too. Like he was also picking up some screens and dump offs on the side and getting to the other rushing attempts. So if we can control him, then it just leaves Saquon with all the touches, and it might not give him a chance to like recover or like heal up or you know, be on the field as often. So I think that he's going to be the person to get the ball a little bit more this time, so that they're not completely relying on Saquon, even though he's a great player. But I want to be able to make sure that, because we've seen Kenneth Gainwell for a couple of years now, and we know that he can also be a threat in the passing game and in the pass coverage, or pass protection rather. So I'm kind of thinking him. I don't know why that, like, his name's sticking out to me for this game.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously those sneaky guys can always, impact a game. You so focus on Saquon, then he gets off, and then now we're gonna be tweeting about how we letting the second street running back beat us and not Saquon. So, that is a good name to mention for sure, because he can be impactful for them at times.
Yeah. All right. So, for those of us that are watching either live or after we have finished the show, do you guys have any questions for us that we haven't talked about, or that you get to hear from us that you would want to be able to submit over here? Because we're probably going to end the show in about 10 minutes. So as we wait for that, let's take a look here. Let's take a look at some of these other players. We had Bernard saying, I expect Kirk Cousins to play better. He has to be under center these next couple of games. Yeah, I think for one, it removes some of the tells that we saw in shotgun and in pistol, right? Or it's like, all right, well, now I don't have to have Chris Lindstrom like tapping on the side of Drew Dahlman just so he can snap the ball, or because those are going to happen with the center and the quarterback. So Kirk hasn't had a history of revealing what he's done there, but as you mentioned before, like I remember a while back with a Packers safety, they were in practice against Brett Favre, and something as very simple as eyesight for a quarterback was something that he picked up on. Like he mentioned, like, all right, well, if Brett Favre looks at the field and looks at the safeties, every single time we knew it was a pass play, because he never looked at the safeties when it was a run. Like they look for anything. And if it's him under center that has to provide some extra tells, or to try to limit the amount of things that we show and reveal to Philly, like the better. But it also comes down to like, all right, well, how good is he at taking those hitches and taking those dropbacks in from the pocket, because that's a lot of bending for his body to do if he doesn't trust his Achilles. Like getting from that stance and then pivoting either to the left or to the right, like that is something that he needs to be able to trust his legs with. And which is why I'm like, all right, well, if you don't like him under center, then get Michael Penix there. I know that Michael Penix also doesn't have a ton of experience being under center, but it's better than this. Like it's better than having to make sure that everything looks less obvious to the defense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to go back to when I was at camp for a couple of days, and I was trying to remember if Kirk was under center a lot when they did 12-on-12s, but I feel like maybe a little bit, but I felt like a lot of it was pistol and shotgun at that time. So I don't know. So
this was something that someone that was there watching all the camp and watching all the practices, like you would have been less surprised that this was the game plan as someone like me that is off on the other side of the country. It's like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, like I just, because I was just thinking about, like, did I really see Kirk behind? I feel like I want to say he wasn't ever, but I definitely remember a lot more shotgun and a lot more pistol for sure. And for all we know,
the same for Penix. Did you remember seeing him?
It was basically the same for Penix. Like a lot of the stuff was shotgun and pistol. So I don't know if that's just how Zach Robinson prefers to have his offenses more, because pistol can be like, pistol's fine because you can drop back in pistol technically still, and you can still do things, but like the way they were doing it, it was very limited. So, because you could do like play action, like we watched some of the college game, like they do that stuff all the time. You can still play action and do all that stuff. They just weren't doing any of that. If it's just him snapping and handing it, it's just like there's nothing special to it. So, So I think for me, I don't know how much behind the center we're actually going to have. That's the thing. But obviously I wasn't there for the practice. I wasn't there for the times they closed off practice. So maybe they've worked on it, but they're just going to use that later. I don't know. So that's something that I think is interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah. So it's very, very important to keep track of, because if we don't provide enough creativity on that side, like I saw the motions from Charlie Warner a lot, and obviously he wasn't the only one. I saw Raymond McLeod motioning, Darnell Mooney motioning, Drake London motioning, Kyle Pitts motioning, Ross Dwelly obviously had that one moment where he was motioned out. We had that one play where it was Bijan motioning out, and then it was a run left to Tyler, and he got like at least 12 yards or something like that. So we have a lot of movement pre-snap, and I don't want that to be obvious either, because for a time it was like, hey, whatever direction we motioned the player for, that was the direction we were running. And then we try to change things up a little bit later, where it was like, all right, well, now we're going to motion out to the right and then still run to the left, or vice versa. So anytime when you can try to get the defense guessing on what you're doing, and pistol and shotgun can absolutely do that for you. But when you're not using it to its fullest potential, again, one game only had like 50 snaps as an offense in total. Like, you're not going to reveal everything that you wanted to do in those 50 snaps, especially when we got in passing situations and we got into more of those moments where we only had so many plays available for us, like 3rd and 19s or something. Like, there's only so much you want to be able to do. And yeah. I think we could try to see a little bit more creativity from there, because I mean, there's vanilla offenses, and then there's that. It's like, I think it's just frozen milk, man.
Not frozen milk.
that ain't vanilla. That is worse. So let's reveal ourselves.
I think someone even mentioned too, like, when Pitts with motion, they would know it's a pass, but when Warner with motion, they knew it was a run, because obviously Warner's the blocking tight end. So I think things like that, even, got to be kind of keep an eye on and be watchful of. When the guy motions, what does that mean? And because if you make it obvious, defenses, guys are so smart nowadays, they'll pick up on those things like Pittsburgh did and be able to take advantage. Because obviously it's on film, so the Falcons have to come into this week with different cadences because it's on film now. And Pittsburgh players have said it kind of openly, like, hey, this is what we saw. So you have something to work off of and change. So that way, when you get back into the Monday night game, you're not going through that again.
Yeah, the other thing was who we were using for chip blocks. And like where they were lined up before the snap. Like we had a play deep in our own red zone where it was Bijan as the H-back and Kyle Pitts on the other side. And one of them does a better job of providing a chip block than the other. Kyle Pitts, I need him to learn how to chip block better, because sometimes he was pushing TJ Watt further away from Caleb McGarry rather than pushing him inside. We had some moments where Bijan was having to pick up a linebacker blitz, so we couldn't chip quite away. So, like, I trust him. Sometimes he wouldn't be big enough to, like, provide a chip for, like, Alex Highsmith on the other side, but at least he was trying. So, yeah, we have to do better in that category if we want to have any outside run and outside play success. The screen passing that we did have, I want to see a little bit more effort, because, yeah, we had some of the blocking lanes there on the 3rd and goal where we wanted to try to get Bijan in the end zone, but Drake London just didn't hold his block. Granted, he's facing Peyton Wilson, a linebacker at NC State. He's not always going to win that matchup, but sometimes you guys just have to put a little bit more effort on tape for you too. So, just looking forward to any little bit of improvement that we can see. So, yep. All right, well, I think that's going to be able to do it for us. where can people find you, Brice?
Yes, sir. I'm available across all social media. Brice_2K if you want to catch up with all my Falcons and Hawks content. Host of the Bleav and Hawks podcast. You can find any podcast platform available out there as well. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, whatever you like to use if you want to keep up with that. And obviously, we got stuff coming as, football season started. So we got content coming, obviously working with Noah. And then some other people in the Atlanta Falcons content creator community. And then obviously the Hawks season starts up in about a month. So we'll be getting ready for that too. So lot going on, though. A lot going on.
All right. Well, once again, appreciate you joining the conversation.
Sure.
Appreciate you guys watching and tuning in. I know that this is it's very weird for me to be in this slot because I'm normally like the very late in the night because I'm in the West Coast and I have my own kind of audience here. So having everyone else here join us in the morning is very appreciative of you guys. And those of you that are watching backwards, we will I'll provide some of the links to anything that we were talking about, like any articles or any like videos that we were posting. And if I haven't yet, then go ahead and let me know in the comments that I'm not doing my job enough or something like that. So I ain't afraid of that. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you. And we'll see you next time.